getting set up and just waiting for Azad to come and join me as host. Twitter's done this lovely new feature where you get music beforehand, so you know you're not just waiting in silence. Right, I can see Azad, so I'm going to invite him to co-host. Let's see if Twitter's managed to get it where it can be done faster than about 10 to 15 seconds to propagate. Okay, so Azad, I can see you. I've invited you to be co-host. I'm switching my mic off on the YouTube video. If you watch that video and you would like to ask any questions, then raise your hand right now. We're going to be bringing you up. This is your opportunity to get your questions answered on any of the different cases that have been happening in these Chapter 11s. I gave an update on FTX, Celsius, Voyager. You can go back to those. Very important BlockFi and the whole Genesis Gemini and how it relates to digital currency group and how they all fit together and how we can learn from each other as we progress through these cases. Right now, Azad is co-host, and I can see the first requests have come up. So Azad, can you confirm, are we recording so we can upload this to YouTube afterwards?
Yeah, everything's recording. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you well. Okay, Azad, do you want to bring some people up and we'll start taking some questions?
Yeah, let's go with Alt-Mum.
Good morning, guys. Good morning. How are you? I just popped in because I know that Simon always has all of the alpha, and this is one of the best spaces just to be able to catch up on the week. One of the things that I've just been looking at is the different aspects of what's happening right now with Voyager token. I'm very curious on your opinion on how that's going to be affected with all of this.
Oh, right. Okay. This is so I haven't looked at so last time I looked at this was from the previous bid. Do you know if anything's changed because I know there was an amended bid. I think they just focused on the whole 6 months process and being able to toggle back the deal. But last that I looked, I think they were just excluding VGX unless it can be approved to list Binance US, and obviously VGX is highly likely to be considered a security in the US. But obviously, if the Voyager platform is no longer there, what is the VGX token? It's just, I guess, essentially a zero utility meme coin for the history of Voyager. Maybe Voyager and the UCC will keep it.
That's my thoughts too.
Yeah, is that allowed to trade on Binance US? I think it's highly unlikely. So my most likely guess in this is that maybe Voyager and the UCC will keep it as an asset of the estate, and whether they're going to be setting up a litigation trust afterwards, they might keep it as one of those assets. And if someone wants to buy it, last time in the FTX process, they were trying to auction it off for about 10 million or so, or a minimum of 10 million. Have you got any updates that I haven't seen?
Can you break down litigation trust just a little simpler?
Sure.
So that I can explain it better.
If you ever watched my video series, one of the things I suggested was to put all of the assets into a fund so that we can get out of Chapter 11 and creditors can benefit from all the growth in the assets. Another way of doing that is if you want lawyers to manage it rather than a fund manager, then you can have a litigation trust. And a trust is simply a structure where the assets are held on behalf of creditors and those assets are transferred over. So one of the valuable assets in the Celsius estate, for example, is the ability to sue Alex Mashinsky for his personal wealth, or some of the, for example, Jason Stone, who stole money. Maybe if it's not settled, you can move that asset over there. If you have, some assets left over. So when Alex Mashinsky was playing venture capitalist with our money, he bought like Polygon shares and he bought various different shares. So we could either settle everything in one go, or we can move them over to a liquidating trust. So you've got a liquidating trust and a litigation trust. So you can transfer over all the potential lawsuits over that. And then in the future, it can be divvied up amongst creditors and you might receive either a small check in the post or hopefully, they come up with a mechanism of distributing those funds to creditors in absence of the Voyager platform once it's closed down.
thanks for breaking that down, because it's easier for me to be able to explain it to other people when you have that simpler form. I'm wondering kind of so I have a bunch of VGX token that I hadn't touched that just kind of sat there, and so I was just curious how that was gonna kind of play out. And then there's a few other people that I know that have used it as their on and off ramp as well, so it's very interesting.
Well, one other way is, so what I suggested for Cell token in the Celsius case was that you just, regulators aren't going to sign off on a race to dump and sell. And, in the case of Cell token, it's also the examiners investigating market manipulation. And so there was, I haven't seen anything or any such accusations in the Voyager case, but there's more shady, so for that reason, I suggested take people's claim, which is the dollar value of what the VGX or Cell token was at the time of petition, and lock in that value in dollars. And that really determines the percentage of the estate you're entitled to. And then Voyager actually ended up doing this. And then you just take all of the assets and then distribute it evenly. So it's like if VGX token has a market cap of all the coins of like 100 million, then unfortunately you use 100 million, but all of the other assets have to be distributed equally across, because the bankruptcy creeps everyone equally. So I don't think it means that you don't get entitled to everything, hopefully. And so, yeah, we'll see how that actually plays out. But I think that's the interesting one, because they said, with in the Binance US, if they don't have the states, then they have to liquidate it, and there's no market to liquidate it. So, yeah, I need to catch up. If anyone has actually read how VGX is going to be treated in the Binance deal, please come up and help, because maybe that's not the up-to-date information based upon the last update. Okay, let's take the next question, Azad.
Okay, let's bring on Courtney.
Hey, you guys. I'm really uncomfortable speaking in front of this many people, so forgive me if I stutter. But I wanted to thank you, Simon and Azad, for training us on so much of this. I'm in both the Voyager and the Celsius case. And my biggest question, and forgive me if I've missed something, but I was in the Jason Stone versus Celsius case the other day for both days. And, we all know that Celsius created the wallet, gave access to Jason Stone before there was a contract. But what I'm interested in is they made a big to-do about getting their passphrase back. And Jason Stone at some point said, I felt uncomfortable being the only one that had it, so I gave it to my dad. And I just found it really questionable in the court case where everyone just skated right past that. It was never really discussed that Jason Stone's father has access to the OXB1 wallet. And I was just curious if I'm the only one that noticed that, or if anybody has any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so firstly, you did an amazing job coming up. So please do it again. You were very clear. Your question was very clear. So hopefully build your confidence, because you've got to get your questions answered. And it's an amazing question. So this just shows you the level of, how our assets were managed. In a sense, so firstly, I agree with the judge. Judge Glenn said a classic quote. I think Tony put it on his Twitter and I retweeted it, but in my summary of the court hearing, I tried to quote it. But basically he was saying, I wouldn't rely upon anything that Jason Stone or Alex Majinsky says in order to build your case. So he knows that they're compulsive liars, sociopaths, and narcissists and whatever. So we know that highly likely Jason Stone stole a bunch of our money due to the way that this was set up, and he put his hand in the cookie jar and then tried to put together some kind of contracts that meant that he was entitled to it. But yeah, if you give a backup phrase to your father, In crypto world, that's giving money to your father, because the key gives you access to the coins. So our coins, approximately $2 billion, or whatever it was in the end, of assets, were literally in a situation where somebody could just give the backup phrase to their father, and their father could take those assets. And they still took some assets from those addresses that the judge fortunately said, while we're discussing this, it's going to be on freeze. But it's absolutely insane. I don't believe a word of that was said from either of those two people in the court process. It's just uncomfortable that I'm the only one, so I gave the backup phrase to my father. That's called uncomfortable, so I give it to Celsius, because Celsius is the one that's responsible. Now, just because they created this new company called Celsius KeyFi, as per the asset purchase agreement that was being discussed, he's claiming that because he was CEO of Celsius KeyFi, he could just put his hands in the cookie jar and treat it as his own. But this was Celsius's money, and the judge, really wasn't. I mean, the judge knows what's going on here. Alex Majinsky and Jason Stone are not to be trusted. A word that they say, he switched onto this process. But absolutely right, it's insane that we could ever be in a process where the backup key goes to somebody's father rather than setting up what I think Celsius must have right now, because it's got court oversight, some kind of multi-signature setup with technology that is designed for managing crypto assets as a professional, fund manager or financial institution, which, there's companies that can do that now. So, it's just, I guess, a test of the time and how things were done, and the whole negotiating contracts with, trust me, bro style of negotiations. Thank you for the question. Who's next, Azad?
Okay, let's bring on Milad.
Hi, gentlemen. Milad. So from Montreal, Quebec. Thanks for everything you guys are doing. Simon, a couple of questions. I'm going to try to make these short, but it's more personalized. So I unfortunately pretty much have all my altcoins in Celsius earn. Luckily, my BTC was in my ledger, so happy for that. But
well done.
I transferred a couple of weeks before they went into Chapter 11. I transferred my XRP coins. Unfortunately, I didn't put in a specific tag, so they didn't receive it. I had to open up a support case with them. And finally, they actually dropped it in. I think in September, October, I got an email saying, yeah, your coins are now available, although we are in Chapter 11. So that being said, I'm assuming I should file a claim, because from the list we got and what I have actually in my wallet is different because of my XRP coins. And two, should I claim anything else? So it's a two-parter. Like, should I file a claim, and should I claim anything else? I've been listening a lot to a few YouTubers, Mr. Bennett, talking about maybe doing additional claims. So that would be my first question.
Okay, great. So let me just give you some random information. So firstly, we always forget to do the disclaimers. You have to remind me, Azad. Not financial advice, not legal advice. Right. I am not a qualified lawyer in any way, shape, or form. Never done that. I understand, regulations, because I run a regulated financial institution, and I've had to learn all this stuff over the last decade. But that's my only experience in it. It's this practical experience rather than being a lawyer. So some people interpret that as me understanding lots of the legal sides, but I'm an amateur when it comes to certain things like litigation. I've never sued anybody in my life, never been sued. And so, I'm just like everyone else, but just learning as we go on that side. Right. So having said that, I do know a bit about the XRP side, so you should definitely hang out with the custody groups. If anyone from the custody groups, if you could put your hand up, raise your hand so people could find you later. In their groups, the this whole ruling on pure custody is those that are entitled to all their funds back. And one of them is where Celsius wasn't actually able to offer that service because they considered XRP as security. And so they moved it over to the custody service, or withhold service rather. And so you may be included in that, where you get to have all your XRP back and the whole Flare token that everyone's ranting about as well. So do check it out. Put it on your claim form, definitely. But you might be entitled to all your XRP plus the Flare token back, because they might define that as pure custody. But you really got to get into the definition. I think Tony, that I talked about earlier, he put out a really useful tweet on the definition of pure custody. Crazy, isn't it, that we have to try and figure out and reverse engineer old tweets to try and find this information? There's got to be a better way. But anyway, it is what it is. So the XRP thing, I think definitely check that out. And then in terms of claim forms, I really can't give advice on this one. I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm doing a claim form, and I'm also attaching an additional document around additional wrongdoings that I think that I should be suing for in the future. So I'm doing that. We've got till the 9th of February now to do that. And if you shout out to Pete Nostop, he created a video on the whole how to file a form and all the different templates that the community have been creating. So do check those out. And obviously Aaron Bennett has been doing amazing work on that as well. So I can't give you much more because I just really don't know. I know that there was Joe was sorry, I just know people as their Twitter profiles. Joe was researching the whole director and officer insurance stuff, whether it covers fraud and various other things. So the answer is, I believe that you should be adding that there. But I've also heard other lawyers say, oh, there might be a problem if you do. So everyone's confused because no one knows the freaking answer. We're all, doing this, but that's what I'm doing.
Okay. And who do you see the person to check? I am on Aaron. I do follow Aaron Bennett, but Peter, what was his last name?
Pete Nostop has a YouTube channel.
Okay.
And he did a video where he went through all the different templates in the community and stuff.
Perfect.
I'm always tweeting his videos out when he covers stuff.
Perfect. Okay, last great information. Last question, and this one I am sure you've already covered it, and I just haven't been, unfortunately, be able to listen to all of your AMAs. Since our coins are now part of the estate again, I'm still with Celsius. What are our now chances of getting any back? I mean, that seemed to have been a what's the word I'm looking for? Just
Scam?
A shot, yeah, or just to all of the earned creditors. I mean,
Firstly, this is such a hot topic for me because I've literally dedicated my whole career around. I found Bitcoin because of the importance of owning your own money, to try and combat the fact that when you deposit your money at a bank, they become the legal owner of your money. And this has been such a topic of mine. This was such a conflict for me because it felt so wrong, so unnatural, so unjust, so criminal, that our coins are now the property of the estate, even though they didn't have the licenses to be able to make them property of the estate, and the judge ignored it. But the reason the judge ignored it is because I don't believe there will be illegal banks or illegal businesses that are allowed to grow like this in the future. So the precedent probably doesn't mean much because the regulators would just stop a business that offered these illegal securities or illegal banking services in the future because they've learned that this was a huge regulatory embarrassment and the part that they played. So for that reason, I think the precedent isn't that important to the future of the market. It's just, what do you do when you're in a legal bank or in a legal securities business and you're in a Chapter 11? So that's why we had this weird thing. Okay, with that said, it was the right decision from everything I can see, because it meant that we could be treated equally in the distribution of all coins that were left. So I think the UCC took the hit for us. The judge took the hit. It was very unpopular with all of us. I gave everyone a good degree of shit because of it. But I think they were looking after us like daddy, doing the right thing. because it means that the coins that Celsius owns, that we thought were ours, can now be distributed equally when we get to the end of this Chapter 11 hellhole. It also means that we're all treated equally across all different assets, whatever, Maszynski played hedge fund manager and VC and bought a bunch of assets with our money. So we can be treated equally across the distributions of those assets as well. So that was the reason for it. And I do believe it's the right decision. It doesn't have too much material impact on the future of our industry as well. So in terms of, are we going to get anything back? It does not mean that you're not going to receive anything back. What it does mean is that we're likely to receive 50% if and only if we can push back against the fact that, this whole Chapter 11 process is just about spending our money legally. And so now we know the ginormous fees that are involved in exiting Chapter 11. We need to make sure that they're not just selling off our stable coins to pay for Celsius's employees. We can make sure that they're not just selling off GK8 so that they can pay for all the lawyers and advisors. We know that they've also just sold off some more of their ASIC machines. I think those were the least efficient ones, so it brought in about 1.3 million to the estate. But we also know that that's just a day in the life of Kirkland and Ellis fighting, the types of criminals that, or the thieves that Alex Maszynski would use as partners in managing people's assets. So we just got to make sure that we get out of Chapter 11 as fast as possible. All the assets go into some kind of fund or trust structure. And we push back at any unnecessary expenses that are used in the name of a standalone reorg or in the name of whatever it is. And I also think that all the processes are pretty much the same right now. I think other than a cash bid, if there's any kind of innovative bid, it would just be about distributing coins and distributing assets. If it's done via, like it is for Voyager, if it's done via a UCC takeover, I think they'll just be looking for similar partners in order to distribute funds and distribute assets. And if Celsius ever gets the regulatory approval, which, I am still very dubious about, but I've also learned through this Chapter 11 process that the unexpected and crazy things can happen. If that does happen, then I think it's again about distributing assets and distributing funds, and everything kind of looks the same. Okay, next question.
Okay, next speaker is Negotiator. Negotiator, can you hear us? Okay, whilst we wait for Negotiator, let's move to Aaron.
Hi guys, thank you very much, Simon, and for all of you guys for what you do. My question is, I know on the FTX side of things, last couple of days there was talk of them finding $5 billion worth of assets. Now, how would that affect what people are likely to get back? I appreciate they were originally saying that it was about an 8 billion hole, and how is there a link with FTX and Celsius? Because I believe that SBF was also, I think he had something like 13 million worth of Celsius, didn't he, as a creditor?
So Almeida and FTX did have, I think, outstanding loans with Celsius. I get confused with all of it right now. They also FTX, Celsius, had exposure to about $3 billion in FTX, and then it went right down to 13 million as a result of their tiffles and arguments that happened that I'm sure we're going to find out about over as this all goes down. But yeah, the $5 billion, that's great news. The fact that FTX has found $5 billion, that's going to be used in two ways. Firstly, it's going to pay for all the creditors, advisors, and maybe the ginormously long process of unwinding all of the craziness. And I'm sure that all the lawyers and advisors will figure out a way of taking $1 billion of that and the rest, in theory, should go to creditors. And so, it all depends on your pro rata entitlement to the different assets. So in the future, your percentage of the estate will be known, and it will be published anonymously. And then in about 6 months, it's going to become public information if you're an FTX creditor, depending on the ruling on that one. So if there's $5 billion that has been found, then that will either become property of the estate if you had an agreement like Celsius, but FTX didn't have that because it was meant to be a custody service and it was fraud, which means that it's way more likely to go into some kind of Chapter 11 liquidation or Chapter 7, not legal advice, but that's where I think it's going. And therefore, you would receive your pro rata share of that, and you've got to fight for either payments in kind or it's going to just go to cash.
And one final question, Simon. Could you see yourself getting involved as like you did with Bitfinex, or is this pretty much is it a sunken ship?
I will never be involved in a Chapter 11 process ever again. I'm more than happy to work with companies that want to use financial innovation, but I don't think Chapter 11 is a financial innovation process. If I'm proven wrong and something different happens in the Celsius case than what I think may happen, then I'd be delighted to support in any way I can. I'll keep watching from the side though, but I said after the Celsius case, I'm just getting back to business as usual and advocating for the industry, and trying to rebuild the industry with all of the different companies that I've invested in over the years that still survive. So yeah, but if Celsius turns out a different way, then if FTX needs any help, but I think I've laid the foundation, and we'll see. I think it's more of it's just a cash game. It's just a cash grab. It's just one big mess of not using any kind of innovation from what I see. But let's see. I'll remain hopeful.
Let's try and negotiator again. Are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was taking a call. But first, I really appreciate what you guys do for all of us. A lot of us are in the same situation. And I apologize if you reviewed this already, but I was a BlockFi customer. And luckily, most of Bitcoin only, most of it was in a wallet. And I also had a overly collateralized loan. So I'm just wondering, what stance do I have with the collateral?
Yeah, that has been a completely silent topic. So in the Celsius case, the issue is that when you're trying to find another lending platform to take over that lending relationship, and firstly, most of them are in Chapter 11 or disappeared. And so the ones that are left, they want the full collateral, obviously, in order to take over those lending relationships. But so far, from what I can see, the assets that were collateral were rehypothecated, and therefore that's the equivalent of being invested in the earn program, because they were just simply, in the BlockFi case, they were using it in order to perform the arbitrage trade at GBTC and all the other stuff that they were doing, and lending it out to FTX with FTT collateral and all the degen stuff that was happening. So my best guess is that collateral gets clipped the same way that earn is. So let's say 50% of the money is missing, then 50% of your collateral is likely gone. And if they go through the bidding process, they may try and work with a lending provider that can take on those loans again, or it will just be an unwind process. Do you know the money that you held in the wallet, was it receiving interest or it wasn't? It was just being held in custody, do you know?
Yeah, it was not just custody.
Okay, so you're likely to get that back because Kirkland and Ellis want to win the case that the money held in earn is property of the estate, so they can spend it. The money held, and the way they win that is by making sure that the money held in wallet or custody in Celsius is given back to people, and then they can just spend away everyone else's money.
Lucky them. Well, thank you, Simon. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring up Natty. Natty, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was discussing with a friend. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for hosting the space once again, Simon. Full energy. I wanted one question about the administrative claim. So we are looking on the litigation trust, hopefully, which is close to the U.S. trustee functionment. And so I wonder if you have studied what would be the fees associated with the liquidation of such funds. I know in the bankruptcy jargon terminology, it's called administrative claims. And so first question was, do you know about those fees? It's a 250 K flat fee, or there is a percentage on the sale and on the litigation? So this is two separate subjects. And bonus question will be for everybody. How do you self-custody your Bitcoin? Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, that is the exact right question to be asking. So when I released my plan, I suggested doing, a fund or a trust structure with a 2 and 20, which is the way that the financial industry manages such things. So the assets are in the fund. You charge a 2% annual admin fee in order to cover all the legal costs and everything to do the litigation. And then they are incentivized by a 20% profit share. That's how the fund management industry works. Now, you can bet that the litigation trust will just want this to be a bottomless check. So they'll just say, for example, Kirkland and Ellis, they were suing, they involved in the case with Jason Stone. There's probably only $3.5 million to come after. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they're willing to spend all of that and do it in an unprofitable way in order to spend all the money. So that's what we have to ensure doesn't happen in the litigation trust. Then we need to ask the question of how is it actually being funded? So these are all really great questions. And the answer is it's completely a negotiation. And you can bet your bottom dollar that there's a bunch of advisors that got paid in the Chapter 11 process that would love to get paid in the litigation trust as well. And so they may rinse the entire thing and we just continue along unless we get it structured in the right way. I'd much rather it be structured in line with, a 2% of assets and a 20%, so everyone's incentivized to actually make profits. But you can bet you lawyers just don't like to. They like to defy the law of gravity, and they'll probably figure out a way of just getting paid no matter what the result is. So let's see. The second question is, the first rule of security is don't tell anyone your security. So I will never tell you how I self-custody. But we, at times with our clients, we've got a group of high net worth investors that are at Retirement Plan B. We brought in security experts to help them set up their self-custody. And that was part of our whole Retirement Plan B program, where we got Andreas Antonopoulos to go through all the different ways of setting up a really secure side, because he does that for consulting companies as well. So, and you can go for the real simple way. The first thing I would say is I do diversify across custody and self-custody. That doesn't mean I store money at exchange. It means I look for really strong legal structures to custody, because if my self-custody ever gets ransomed or whatever it may be, I mean, I've got a solid setup, but if it ever happens, then I want to make sure it doesn't wipe out my entire wealth. And I want to make sure that if that got confused in the whole legacy planning and retirement planning process, that that's hedged and diversified. The second rule is complication can be the enemy. So sometimes it's best just to have the most simple setup. Buy yourself a ledger or buy yourself a Trezor, and just get started. Follow the videos very carefully. Take your time. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to move on.
Just to finish on that, thank you very much for advising everyone to look into a hardware wallet, Trezor or Ledger. That is a good point. And I just wanted to know for the history, not disclosing any actual security details, if you had to look at in the first time between a Bitcore paper wallet and a Ledger, what will you choose? Like that for a friend, asking for a friend.
Yeah, paper wallets is what we had to do before. So I first met the Trezor team. Isabel was the co-founder, and she was at the very first Bitcoin conference I spoke to. And paper wallets are a nightmare. Yes, they are more secure, but you have to think about so many different things. You can engrave them onto steel and things like that. I'd suggest start with a ledger, and then or a Trezor, and then just improve from there. The enemy of security sometimes is just getting too complicated, too clever, and effing up the whole process. So just graduate bit by bit is what I suggest. Okay, let's do the next question.
Okay, we've got a question from Flying Treasure.
Hey, Simon. Appreciate you, man. Little off topic question. It's kind of on like Coinbase and Kraken and Binance US. I've moved most of my coins off those exchanges, but, I noticed they still have staking, programs with them, and even Coinbase. I was earning yield on just coins that were sitting there when I'm trying to move them off, a week or two later after purchasing. Can you have any comment on these exchanges and those services that they're offering? I haven't heard any discussion about, hey, they're offering illegal securities and what might happen with those exchanges.
Yeah, sure. So my not legal advice opinion is that this industry started with Bitfinex, a guy called Phil Potter. He created the peer-to-peer order book where people that wanted to go short Bitcoin could borrow some Bitcoin off somebody else that wanted to receive the interest. And that's where this industry started. Now, that is a very different thing to putting your funds up in a black box where they decide what they're going to do with them, and give no disclosures on what they're doing with your funds. And so, even to be fair, that's what FTX were doing. You could go into the order book and you could lend out your cryptocurrency to someone else that wanted to borrow them, and then they had to put up the collateral, and if the collateral went wrong, it's automated into the system. So Bitfinex created that market, and that is very different, in my opinion, to a security, because that is what I thought Celsius was originally doing. I thought Celsius had a bunch of institutions that were like hedge fund managers over collateralized, and then individuals that were over collateralized. They put up their collateral, and they would get a margin call if the trade, if the collateral goes down to a certain value. Where it all went into securities, from my opinion, is when they looked at not disclosing what they're doing with the money, and then it becoming the dependency upon the efforts of an individual to decide what to invest into. That's called a fund. And that's a security, and that requires deep disclosures in what you're doing with that money, suitability, and all the other things. So, in also staking is, so if you think about it, this singular thing where you know what they're doing. So if it's staking, then you know that they're using it for staking. It's only illegal if they don't stake with it and they do something else with it. And so what the future of staking is in terms of a financial institution performing staking services, and whether that's a security, we haven't seen anyone determine that. So exchanges offering staking services, there's no determination that that's a security, and no indication. I think Gary Gensler said that it may be in the future, but I don't see that much risk there personally. I also don't see the risk in the peer-to-peer order book where you're matching up over collateralized, and it's all done through an order book in a transparent way. And so you would hope that that's what they're doing. Now, if Binance US is offering yield and they're not doing that, then you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be a letter coming through from the SEC, if there hasn't already been, They just haven't made it public yet. So Celsius, they were having letters from the SEC and they were negotiating various other things. So there's different types of yield. And that's a different regulatory regime that requires different licenses. So in order to offer that in the US, you could just go off of money transmitter licenses, which Binance US has in certain states. And that's really tying into the Voyager side. So Coinbase, they had to take away their program because they actually asked the SEC whether they should do it, and the SEC said no, it's a security, and they don't. We actually sold our US broker dealer to Coinbase, so Coinbase does have the security law compliant structure because we gave it to them, but they're not using it because they don't want to ruin the user experience, and so Gary Gensler is then saying, can everyone just please come into compliance? If you're not coming into compliance, there's all the regimes there already, then we're going to contact you and we're going to have to use enforcement. Don't let that excuse what they've done as well, because they just allowed the companies to become big so that they could get a bigger check, which I think is a big criticism of them as well. So yeah, that's my perspective on what's happening there. Make sure you know where the yield comes from, and if they're transparently disclosing it, then it might operate under a money transmitter regime, which they may have covered. If they're just pooling together money and deciding where to invest, that's a security in every country around the world that I know.
Okay, looks like that was the last question, unless anyone else wants to jump on and ask a question. We've got 10 minutes remaining.
Wow, okay, are we finishing early? Are you going to let me finish early, or are we going to find another question? If you've got a question, please jump up. If you hadn't watched the YouTube video, please go back to that. I covered exactly how the Voyager case relates to the Celsius case. The Celsius case relates to the BlockFi case. The BlockFi case relates to the Gemini Genesis case, which relates to the digital currency group case, and the GBTC case, which then relates back to the FTX case. So make sure you head back and watch that. If you didn't watch it, it's 35 minutes long. And hopefully I just give you everything you need to understand where these things are going next. I can see that we've got a couple more requests. Did they come through?
Yeah, let's bring on Daniel.
Hey, thanks, guys. Simon,
Hey, Daniel.
is it your opinion? So I'd rather not file the claim if I have to amend it, but because I don't want to mess up with my claim. But is it your opinion that we're only entitled to whatever litigation if we do that? Like, is that just part of the pie for everybody if we go after Alex, or is that something we got to specifically specify on that claim?
Yeah, some lawyers have told me that it's different if you're in the US and not the US. That if you want to have entitlement to that, then you just need to put whatever you think that they've done. And you should attach that, because those that don't may not be entitled to that. Now, what is that? We don't know, and no lawyer will tell you because no one knows. But I do remember in the Voyager voting form, when they were doing the FTX side, there was a checkbox on the equivalent of Stretto, where you had to tick whether you wanted to be including in these things. I don't think they're doing that. But yeah, I just can't give you advice because I can't get a straight answer from lawyers, and they won't give you advice until they're actually engaged by you, because they can't take responsibility for something that goes wrong unless you've signed terms and conditions with them. So unfortunately, all I can do is tell you what I'm doing, which is that I believe that if I upload the claim form, then there's this off chance that I might be entitled to something that those that don't do it might not be entitled to. And the extent to which you want to put that there, I don't really know what the consequences are. I'm sorry.
All right. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it, man.
Cheers.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's bring on the next speaker. Is RMA.
Hey, good afternoon. Simon, this is Chris. I've got a quick question. You mentioned earlier a gentleman by the name of Pete. And
Pete No Stop.
Okay, could you spell the last name?
Yeah, PET. Yeah. Space NO space stop STOP.
SOEP.
Sorry, stop STOP.
STOP. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you'll find him on YouTube. He's a very small YouTube channel, but he's been given lots of very specific content with the Celsius stuff.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Let's bring on Jovi.
Hello.
Hey, Jovi.
Hey, how you doing? Simon. So my question might be a little more theoretical, but you, with all your knowledge, you have a much better understanding than me, of course. I just, my take on this crypto industry now, I have a bunch of stuff on Celsius, but I'm just wondering your take on, as I'm seeing it, it seems to me that if the crypto industry is going to work and provide services like through platforms, it would appear that we just need more regulation, which means government will step in more, and essentially it would end up like any other bank. So I'm wondering just your take or your knowledge on it. Does it appear that crypto will basically have to go that way with regulation to be something that people can trust to actually enact services with their crypto? Because I know we can just transfer it, but are we just going to go in a direction where it's going to be like any other bank, or is there something else you see?
Yeah, I come with the opinion that we don't need new regulations with the exception of a few things. I believe that our industry just didn't comply with the regulations that already exist in terms of the centralized platforms. I know the reason I come from that opinion is because when we set up our company, Bank to the Future, we got all the legal opinions, and all of these things were defined, and we complied with securities laws from day one, and we innovated from there. And then we worked on innovating securities laws to cater for the industry. And then in 2017, everyone just ignored them. And we were like, we got the Jobs Act reform in the US, we got the equity crowdfunding rules in the UK, and then all these, every other industry followed them. But then the crypto industry just went at it. And then every time someone else did something, someone else copied, and then they stretched the barrier a little bit further until it was so disjointed from reality that they end up in the pump and dump cycle of the 4-year cycle and the regulatory crackdown. So firstly, this cycle was more severe than any other cycle because our industry was bigger. But we've had this every time. So if you get a chance to watch a video I created this week, it was called Bitcoin's Final 2 Tests. And Bitcoin's final 2 tests were the next 2 tests that we need to get through in order to really solidify Bitcoin to the next stage where it becomes more of a store of value than a speculative store of value. So I gave a video on that. It's a shorter video. And where does it go in the regulatory side? I do think we need more clarity in the US about what is a security, what isn't a security. So the XRP case will help with that. You've got the layer 1 chains with pre-mines, and then you've got Bitcoin, which has been defined as commodity stroke property. And I think stable coins regulations is coming in the case of the US. And then everyone where people are raising finance through the issuance of a token, to me, that needs disclosures. It needs prevention from market manipulation, and it needs suitability testing. So we've always treated those as securities. But you can have custom regulations, which is happening outside the US, where you have things like virtual asset service provider regimes. Those need to be upgraded to factor in market manipulation and disclosures, but I think they're just going to put them in, do what El Salvador did. So El Salvador kind of said, Bitcoin's legal tender, and everything else is a digital asset, which is treated with our securities laws. I think you're going to see that. And then a rush to more and more enforcement. So everyone that has an earn program will figure out how to be a securities business now. Everyone that's rehypothecating will figure out how to become a bank. They could either acquire one or get the license and come into compliance with that. Everyone that's doing custody without a license will figure out how to either be a money transmitter, get a money service business, or get a virtual asset service provider offshore. And so everyone just needs to come into compliance. The DeFi side, that's a tricky one. So the centralized side, I think, is pretty clear. DeFi side, that I think we need to defend pretty aggressively. But we need to figure out how you define between centralized pretending to be decentralized, not an easy problem, versus genuine decentralized, i.e. if someone created, a developer created a DeFi service on top of Bitcoin where they couldn't pre-mine the Bitcoin, and it didn't involve money printing or token printing, that needs to be figured out. And my hope is that we can have peer-to-peer, other peer-to-peer financial services, because that would be awesome. So I think those are the areas that need clarifying. I don't think any of the centralized stuff does need further clarifying. People just need to come in compliance. Sorry to sound like Gary Gensler, but that's the one that I do agree on.
Okay, just before we finish, we had a speaker whose internet connection wasn't working but they were going to go live, but they've written on Twitter Space, and it's from Gas or Gabs. Sorry, Azad and Simon, Spaces will not work here in New Jersey, Celsius country, typical. But look, wanted to point out with legal fees in any of these cases, 11 USC 330 and the UST in the case has obligation to review fees for reasonableness. You don't have to sit back and take it on. Fees you feel are unreasonable, not saying this happened, but for X, K, and E does not get to fake a reorg for a year and intentionally draw out case at expense of creditors. There's a mechanism for review, right? And more good news, UST will help you here. Don't have to go out of pocket.
All right, well, really appreciate that alternative perspective. And I started this process less cynical, and maybe I need to review my stance right now, and look more a bit objectively into what this process actually is, and that we can't be completely rinsed dry. So thank you for providing that alternative perspective. Okay, where are we now, Azad? Are we done, or is there more?
Milad's just got one more question, and I guess we can wrap it up there. Thanks.
I'll take all
thanks,
the questions.
Azad. Hey, Simon. Sorry to keep you guys longer. I just going back to Celsius, your plan. It seems so long ago when you were excited and telling us about your what you were going to propose, Bank to the Future, and all of the structure that you were building and proposing. Where are we with that? And I'm sorry, I'm sure you've talked about it before, but I'm just curious to know today, where are we at with that? Or what are the chances? Thanks for everything.
Yeah, no worries. So I was forced into the bidding process. Didn't really want to be a bidder, but it turned out that was the only way to try and execute it. In order to achieve that, we had to pull together all the different licenses and regulations. So we focused on regulations really, really early. And so, we had a failed acquisition that didn't pass the due diligence. So that didn't give us the lending licenses in order to be able to offer it in the US. Then you needed the money transmitter / banking partners. We got all that together and we introduced it to the process. We also introduced a bunch more potential bidders to the process that could take over certain parts. So we certainly can't do everything, but where we can be useful is we're experts in securities, and we introduce other companies. So we invest, like there's Securitize, there's INX, there's other people that can distribute securities to shareholders. We're less US centric, and what we have learned in the case of Binance is that they really do favor a US centric process, and so we might not be the most appropriate people. We do have a US broker dealer within our group, so we can cater for that. But again, we submitted exactly what we would do if I was on the UCC, and we continue to engage with the UCC and give them, and if they want us at any time, we're here. We gave Celsius a pre-Chapter 11 reorg plan. We gave the new management ideas for a reorg plan. We gave all creditors what we would do through the video series. We continue to believe that the best is to actually combine together a bunch of bidders. So, I don't want to name specific names or give away any information, but an example is a company like Abra, which, full disclosure, I'm a shareholder in. If they wanted to take over the lending side, then as long as they're sufficiently regulated to do that. If Binance wants to distribute the coins and they figure out how to do it with Voyager, and they're sufficiently regulated and they figure out the hurdles there, and if they want us to distribute securities, or they want a more US-centric company to distribute securities, and I also introduced several mining players into the process. And if they want to take on the mining, then I think the UCC needs to plug a bunch of people together, because I don't think anyone has the full coverage. We tried to get full coverage, and unfortunately we failed. But we put in our, as I said, we put in our bid in order to give everyone their assets and give everyone the shares. And now I don't feel like there's anything more I can bring to the process. Different players within the advisors to the UCC, they said they used our video as a training video. They remain optimistic about what they can achieve. We've got all the deadlines. I gave that in the video. And so, I'm at the stage where nothing is within my control anymore. So I just remain of service and to be of utility as soon as that's useful, whether it be the bidding process, whether it be Celsius, whether it be a UCC takeover. It's up to the UCC now and Celsius. They control the process. So once I have no control, I just focus on things I can control.
Okay, I think that's a wrap.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you didn't watch the YouTube video, please go back and watch it. I think it's very important to understand the connection and not just be in an echo chamber or bubble in your own Chapter 11 case, because what's happening and the precedents deeply affect each other. So I hope I gave a useful overview about how all the different Chapter 11s affect each other and the knock-on effect. And if you're enjoying these, do me a favor, like the video on YouTube, subscribe to it. That's what I ask in return, so that we can get more and more people that want to, that can get better results, hopefully as a result of this process. I hope that what I've been doing is of use. Every time you come up, it re-energizes me. So thank you for that. But always remember, you're alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Some are going to get wrecked, others are going to do really well. I hope that this content helps you get on the right side of financial change. I'll see you this time next week, and I'll try and give more updates as ever. Thank you, everybody. Peace.